In this session, I'm going to talk about security. First of all, I'm just going to explain security, what you can do with the security options, and then in the sessions that follow, I will show you how to set up security. So the security options will allow you to manipulate users' access. In other words, what will they be allowed to do and what will they be allowed to see? So first of all, you'll set up groups, and then you'll connect a user to a group and a company. When we look at groups, there's two things you can do. You can decide which menus are the user allowed to see. In other words, if it's just a point of sale person, giving them access to debtors and utilities will not necessarily be an option. If it's a debtors clerk, for instance, then you could do that. Then, once you've given them access to a menu, you then define within the menu what would they be allowed to do. Would they be allowed to see, for instance, the open drawer button or the stock inquiries? And then within that option, for instance, under cash sales, would they be allowed to void a sale? Would they be allowed to suspend a sale? Would they be allowed to use the customer info option? So then you define within the option what is allowed to do. If you do get to an option where it's a void sale, the user is not allowed to do it, then you can have a supervisor override. You can have a supervisor, he or she can then override that option, and then the cashier or the user will be able to continue. In other words, to summarize the security option, you will be allowed to create groups, define the menus you're allowed to see, and then define what is allowed within a menu, and then you create a user, you connect a user to a group and a company, and then you can override access for that user. And that concludes talking about the introduction for the security options.